slope upwards toward Mount Talinis. And it has two major rivers. We call them the Banica River, which runs through the city towards Mindanao Sea, and Ocoy River that partly passes on the northwest. So when the city experienced non-stop rain for almost 24 hours in 2009, two major rivers in the city overflowed, causing flood, killed many lives, and damaged properties and crops. It was the first time the city experienced such catastrophe and was never prepared for it to happen. The incident was again followed by another flooding when Typhoon Sendong, which brought heavy rains in 2011, caused floods that swept throughout the city and neighboring towns, killing 22 lives in the city. The damage caused in the series of flooding in the city has cost thousands or not millions of money. Aside from the water damage to properties, there is a significant humanitarian cost in terms of both physical and mental health issues as a result, of course, relocation and property damage. And so that's basically the reason why we are having this research. We wanted to create a model that would simulate, that would be able to predict flood in Dumaguete City. So what I have here is the framework of our study. There were actually three major stages. The first one is the data preparation. The second one is the model creation. And the third one is the data representation. In the data preparation part, that's basically where we clean the data. There were actually a lot of work in the data preparation stage as we were dealing with manually recorded data since 1975. Those data that we need in order to train the network. So we started encoding from 1975, and most of the data there were actually on paper. And then we also have to clean, and then we need to normalize all those information. So in this study, three maps, which are geological data from Dumaguete City Planning and Development Office, was utilized. This includes road maps with built-up areas, a contour map, and a map of rivers and waterways. The road map shows the major roads that includes national, major, new, and diversion roads. The map also includes a convenient delineation of borders of all the 30 barangays in the city. The contour map shows contour lines. Now, these contour lines are lines drawn on a map connecting two equal elevations. It shows the elevation and the topography of Dumaguete and the shape of the terrain. It also includes data on build-up areas represented in yellow color, which shows the areas where there are man-made infrastructure such as residential and commercial areas, and which also shows where human population is concentrated. Now, the data is important since these infrastructures slow the rate of movement and accumulation of flood, but also prolong the duration of flood to recede. The other map that we use as input is the rivers and waterways map, which shows bodies of water in Dumaguete City. And historical meteorological data of the city from year 1975 to 2014 were gathered from the Philippine Atmospheric Geophysical and Atmospherical Services Administration, and in short we call it PAGASA, where flood historical data from 1999 up to 2013 were gathered from Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office of Dumaguete City. This study also relied on geographic information systems in mapping and identifying topographic features and ground elevation. Point sampling algorithm, a plug-in tool of QGIS, was used in getting the elevation data, which extracts pixels values at a certain location or aggregate them over the area.
Hello?
So due to the, hello?
You
Yeah,
have
okay.
left for your presentation.
Okay, so due to the large set of atmospheric and geographic data used as training sets and the limited hardware capacity and specifications during our training, only 2 networks was successfully modeled using epochs up to 25,000 level. So in this study, the testing was performed on 2 networks trained at 12,000 epochs because experiments of the epoch value shows that at level 12,000, the error rate becomes steady. So to visualize flood severities in the map, the network model predicted values in the range of 0 to 1. And we converted that into color label. So the color label indicating red color as severe and green as normal. And there are also colors in between. The 2 networks generated after training were both tested on 50 different scenarios of selected dates from 2000 to 2014. So although the results are similar, the results generated by the first network when tested on the days when actual flooding occurred show less consistent results, while the second network show flooded areas which is more or less equivalent to actual flooded areas, especially on December 2011 and 14. So based on the data the researchers gathered from DRMMO and from records of barangays, flooded areas are usually limited near river banks, which are better represented in the prediction of the second network. And also observation on the test performed on both networks showed that the second network, which we generated, performed better at 86% prediction compared to the first one, which is at 80. So we have made some observation of during our experiment. We have noticed that most of the area around a river supposed to be exposed to flooding, but researchers observed that the result, based on our result, there are some gaps to the flood extent, but still they congregate near the rivers. And also the researchers have also observed few anomalies in some areas where it is not supposed to be flooded. However, there are still possibly that these areas might have experienced flooding, but not as severe as those areas that are documented. So we have also some recommendations. This is specifically on the implementation side. We need to reduce the distance between nodes because currently we're using distance for the nodes in the barangays at 2,810 nodes. Reducing the distance may effectively assign correct geographic points. And then adding more barangay to the testing sets, the neural network has predicted atmospheric properties, but has not fully learned.
Conclude faster now.
Okay, so this is already the last slide. Adding more barangay to the data set may improve the learning of the network. Okay, so that's the end of the slide. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for the presentation. Any questions, ma'am? Okay, thank you. We'll move on further.
Thank you.
Any questions, ma'am? Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Nice presentation, ma'am. I just want to know your research data is how much area?
Sorry, how much?
Area. You want to cover the area, no? How much area you have limit?
The area covers the entire city of Dumaguete, which is around 8,000 hectares.
Okay. And how many times you want to censor that data? Repetition of data here?
We did 12,000 repetition of data.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presentation is by Vishwardhan Reddy. I've unmuted you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
This presentation is on a framework for remote health monitoring. You can begin with the presentation.
Able to see the slides?
Yes, we are able to see and it's audible as well. You can begin.
good afternoon to one and all. Myself, Vishwavardhan Reddy. Today I will be presenting my topic on a framework for remote health monitoring. So these are my contents that I'll be discussing today. First, I'll go with the introduction. So what is a WBAN? A WBAN generally consists of a biomedical sensors which collects data that are deployed on the body or inside the body or near to the body. And once the data is collected, it will be sent to the cloud for the storage purpose. Once the data is in the cloud, there is a purpose of having storage. But however, the data that is being stored in the cloud is not being used properly. Okay. And coming to the second one, there are many recent technological advances like sensor development, cloud computing, wireless Internet of Things, machine learning, and decision-making technologies. Okay, of these technologies are helping the wireless body area network to store the data in the cloud and use it efficiently for taking a decision making by sending that data to the doctors, or it can be a medical care personnel. Then, even though with these technologies as well as these advances, the sensed data is not being used properly due to the proper lack of expertise, time, as well as money. Hence, such system has not become very common and moreover still not yet implemented practically. And we will be using this as a point and we will be discussing some use cases as well as effective end-to-end solution. Then literature survey, there is huge amount of literature survey on this. However, if you see, not all the works are related on the practical implementation, and however, many of the applications will not show the data to the patient. I mean, it is a constrained approach to the patient related information as well as making the decisions. And there is no proper communication with the core team, I mean like the care team, which is not an effective one also. So thus, in this, what we are going to do is, I'll just take one example and then I will discuss how it is moving further. So let's say there is a patient who is undergoing a treatment in a concerned clinic. So he visits the clinic, shows to the doctor, okay, then he gets some sort of electronic medical records. So that records will be stored only in that particular hospital. Now let's say tomorrow or after 1 year or within 2 to 3 months, he may visit another hospital and there he will be having some more electronic medical records. So now the problem is like, so the sharing of these electronic medical records is not happening between the two hospitals, even though if the medical records are being shared, but they are not being effectively utilized, as well as there is a delay in sharing with the hospital people. So hence, there is always necessity that we need to make one proper storage place where we can store all the medical electronic records of a single patient and access it to wherever they go to whichever hospital. So there are some novelty contributions in my work, that is, so we have developed a hardware prototype, which is nothing but a small, light-weighted, low-cost and powerful integrated smart health monitoring system. And this health monitoring system will be deployed on the body and they will be transmitting the data to the cloud using a Wi-Fi, or it can be a subscriber identity module, that is a 2G SIM. In India, we have only as of now 2G SIM. Then we have developed a web as well as a mobile application so that the patient can view his medical records as well as the doctors can see his medical records when the patient takes prior appointments. Then once the data has come to the doctor, he can suggest some sort of medication, okay, where the patient can recover being at home. With this, he can avoid traveling expenses as well as delay in communicating, I mean like delay in traveling from the home to the hospitals. So the objectives could be like this. First, we'll have to identify what are the various vital signals that we need to measure and what are the sensors that measures these vital signals. Then we will be designing this wireless body area networks. After that, we have designed the web and mobile application for the health application system, and then we'll be testing it as well as evaluating the prototype. So the methodology is like this. As you see, we have a user patient who is equipped with 5 to 6 biosensors such as body temperature, ECG, EMG, snore, and body position. All these sensors, they sense the vital signals of the patient and will be sent to the particle photon microcontroller over here. So the particle photon microcontroller will process the data and will be sent to the cloud for the storage purpose. In the cloud, we have developed the health web application where it will take the data of the patient, and there we have developed an algorithm which can predict the diseases as well as the symptoms of the particular patient. And this, it can be seen in the patient mobile app. When he log in with his mobile number, he can see his reports, and if he sees that if there is any emergency, he can consult with the doctor. If not, he can no treatment is required. So you no need to have booking of appointments. So just for one case, I will be explaining the methods. Okay. So initially we have taken with the ECG sensor. We collected the ECG of some 1,000 samples, and in each, what we have done is we have calculated this heart rate using FFT, that is fast Fourier transform, by detecting the peaks. Okay, so peaks can be identified in an ECG signal using R to R interval, and then we have smoothened it for every 0.5 seconds of moving window. Okay, so these are the formulas that I kept for better understanding of the how we can calculate the heart rate from the sensor. And this is a prototype, implementation prototype equipped with W-band, and these are the sensors that is deployed on the body temperature as well as moving position, etc. But since the body position is not considered here because the patient was lying on the bed. And then development of web and mobile application. So for the development of web and mobile application, we have used various programming languages such as Python, Django Framework 1.10, as well as the database, the PostgreSQL. So once the application is developed, we deployed this application into the AWS by taking
Sorry for the interruption. You just have 2 minutes left to conclude.
Yes. So in EC2. So, and that application is running with the prescribed IP address that is given in this slide. So this is the various steps how we deployed the web and mobile application into the AWS cloud. And this is how the front panel that you can see in the eHealth admin, by giving the user ID and the password, the hospital people can log in, add patient name, like you can see the below figure, ECG report, body temperature, he can upload all the details. And then he can also add the doctor's name as well as super specialty address, phone number, etc. Then this is the flow of web and mobile application. So a patient can log in through his credentials into the mobile app, check the reports and sees if there is an abnormality by using our developed algorithm to predict the symptoms. So, and also using the predicted symptoms, we will be able to suggest who is the doctor best for him to diagnose. And based on that, he can book the appointments on the selected date and time, as well as the price ranges are available for him to select and the doctor's availability too. So this is a mobile application that we mentioned in the B figure. And here for one of the patient, his ECG report was showing 24 beats per minute. And our algorithm has suggested that he is suffering with the bradycardia, and the list of symptoms that has been mentioned over here. And the doctor's suggestion, so is based on his super specialty as well as the ratings, number of ratings, as well as the highest rating also. And then this is the sample algorithm for predicting the disease and the symptoms. So these values that we have considered, let's say at the fourth line, if ECG is greater than 1 and ECG is less than 60, so there are particular type of symptoms that to display, right? So these values that we have taken by contacting certain doctors in the Bangalore, and we have taken the consent of them, and based on that we have designed this algorithm. Similarly, so the patient can book the appointments to the concerned doctor by selecting the date as well as the time. Over here, this is the doctor's portal where he can see the list of the appointment history. And here the doctor, if he is willing to go out, or else if he is coming into the hospital, he can give his own OPD timings and what is the appointment fees, etc., etc. So conclusion, so with this, a smart health monitoring system framework has been developed and is demonstrated in this work. And moreover, it consists of provision of adding a patient as well as doctors, where it can display the list of doctors as well as patients too. Hence, this framework is more effective and cost-effective way of providing quality health services. And future work, it can include that predicting more number of diseases apart from ECG, like body temperature, then EEG, etc. And develop our algorithm. We can have the comparison of our algorithm accuracy with another algorithm too. Thank you. These are the references.
Thank you for the presentation. Any questions, ma'am?
Thank you. Nice concept, sir. I just want to know when your symptoms diagnosed, when patient required or body changes some pattern.
Sorry, ma'am.
When your symptom diagnosed the changes, when patients required that, or when body shows some changes in ECG or something else.
When the body shows some symptoms, madam.
Okay, when body shows symptoms, it might be possible that body temperature increases due to the sauna bath or something else, or it can be possible because of fever. So how you diagnose that, or how you
It can be
differentiate?
the possibility of fever, madam.
Okay, so how that symptoms diagnose? What will the module?
Diagnosis will be prescribed by the doctor, madam. So the symptoms will
Okay.
to the doctor portal where the doctor can view and he can suggest the medication.
Okay, might be, matlab you have to add some features so that it can be diagnosed with the false symptoms.
Yes, ma'am. I'll do that.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We also have one more chair with us, that is Dr. Latika Desai, Associate Professor and HOD, Dr. D.Y. Patel Institute of Technology from Pune. She has 22 years of teaching experience. Area of interest includes digital electronics, data security, and embedded system. I welcome you, ma'am. So we'll begin with the next presentation. Do we have Amrita Naik with us? Amrita,
Yes.
are you ready with the presentation? Amrita?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
No,
It's not visible.
not yet.
Okay. Can you see now?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So you can
Okay.
begin with the presentation. Just take care
Yeah.
of the time frame, right? Okay.
Okay.
We
Okay.
need, we
Okay.
have more presenters left.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Yeah.
I'm Amrita Naik, and my co-author is Damodar Reddy Edla. And the paper that I'm going to present is lung tumor classification using CNN and GLCM based features. So the main aim of our paper is to identify cancerous and non-cancerous tumors in lung CT scan. So mainly when the CT scans is observed by a radiologist, there could be two types of tumor. One is malignant tumor, another is benign tumor. Malignant is a cancerous tumor, whereas benign is non-cancerous tumor. So main aim here in this paper is to detect the malignant nodules or malignant tumors in the lung CT scan. So recently there has been use of CNN architectures to identify the malignant tumors in the lung CT scans. So we thought we'll use CNN architecture. In addition to that, we also added some additional features so that we could improve the accuracy of detection of malignant nodules in a CT scan. So I would like to show some sample pictures here. This is a CT scan image of a lung wherein you can see a malignant nodule over here. Similarly, you could even see a lung CT scan wherein there is a benign nodule over here. mostly a benign nodule is not propagating outwards, whereas a malignant nodule is confined to its area. Okay, so I'll go to the next one. This is my proposed work. Here, what do we do is, we are going to combine the CNN feature with some additional feature. Now, which additional feature I'm going to combine? I'm going to combine the GLCM feature. That is because when I use the CNN feature, the spatial relationship between the pixel is not considered. So in addition to CNN features, I'm adding GLCM features to the CNN features, and I combine this feature and apply SVM classifier in order to classify the nodule as malignant or non-malignant or else benign. So basically the tumor is segmented out from the CT scan, and then I apply CNN feature extraction so that I could extract 2048 CNN feature. At the same time, I do apply GLCM feature extraction phase here so as to extract around 48 texture feature from the nodule. These features are combined together wherein I get around 2096 features, and these features are finally given to the SVM classifier so as to classify the lung nodule as benign or malignant. So this is what we propose to work on. So gray level co-occurrence matrix, it's a matrix which gives you the spatial relationship between the neighboring pixel in an image. After calculating the GLCM matrix, we calculate 6 GLCM features, that is contrast, dissimilarity, homogeneity, angular second movement, energy, and correlation. The formula for the same is being listed down. Along with these GLCM feature, we also extract the CNN features. So when you extract the CNN feature, there is a sequence of convolution and pooling layer which is being used to extract the CNN features from the lung nodule. After this, mostly a CNN uses fully connected network and a softmax layer to classify the feature into either malignant or non-malignant. But I have not used those two layers here. Instead of using fully connected and softmax layer, I have used the SVM classifier as seen in this figure. The SVM classifier is used instead of softmax layer. So this is what we propose to do, and after applying the proposed architecture on different classifier, I found that SVM classifier has given us better accuracy in classifying the lung nodule. The accuracy that I had got here was 93.10%, so as to classify the lung nodule into malignant and non-malignant. Whereas decision tree, linear regression, naive Bayes classifier, random forest, KNN had given comparatively lesser accuracy than the SVM classifier. And finally, this is my result. With CNN architecture, I use the learning rate as 0.02, batch size is 100, and I use 70 epoch, wherein the training accuracy of my CNN classifier was 98.1%. After testing, the test accuracy was 93.1, sensitivity was 95.97, and the specificity was 86.8%. This was after combining CNN, GLCM, and SVM classified. And this is my validation curve for the training and the validation data set. So that's it. And this is my reference for the paper which I have used. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any questions, ma'am? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Amrita.
Yes, ma'am.
Why is there so much difference in SVM? What do you think? What is the reason?
Mostly because the dimensionality of the data was very high, and SVM works well on high dimensional data. So that is why probably the SVM has given me a better accuracy.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Anshul Jain. Uh, Anshul, are you able to hear me? I've unmuted you.
Yes, I can hear you. So can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
You can begin with the presentation.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can. Begin, please.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening to the chair and to the organizers and to all my friends. So the topic of my paper is Framework for Securing IoT Ecosystem Using Blockchain. So this is a review paper of a bigger part of research we are doing on IoT ecosystem. So our project is related to securing IoT ecosystem. So we have been trying different methods. So in this paper, we are trying to secure the IoT ecosystem using blockchain. So the table of contents would be introduction, blockchain and its benefits, IoT and blockchain use cases, review, the architecture we are proposing, and future projections, including conclusion. So here I would like to begin with what is an IoT ecosystem. So IoT ecosystem is basically a network of different IoT components, which can be moving device, still device, or devices connected with any of the network which is used for sensing our data. So this can include healthcare, smart home devices, smart transportation, any type of devices. So our objective is to secure all these devices from different attacks like eavesdropping, physical attack, and many other attacks on networks, which can include denial of service or distributed denial of service. So in our research, we are trying to secure our IoT ecosystem using blockchain. So before going directly to blockchain, we would like to give few minutes on what is blockchain and how it works. So blockchain, as we know, is a distributed and open record system where all the transactions happening on the network gets recorded uh, to the every other node on the network. So it is a decentralized network where all the transactions are recorded in a hash format so that no other person can change them. So how it works, it is a basic example of how Bitcoin works is. So first of all, you let's take an example of a Bitcoin. So when we send a Bitcoin or any other such thing uh, coin to other person, the transaction is requested and is sent to all the peer networks, which can be hundreds or thousands of the nodes connected to our network. So when the transaction is sent, each of the node connected to our network records the transaction, and we call them miners, and a transaction ID is generated. All these transactions are recorded in a hash format, so this hash can never be modified. So whenever a new transaction is generated, a node gets attached to our transaction and the transaction is considered as complete. So here what we are doing is other than identifying the benefits of IoT, blockchain in IoT ecosystem, we have also uh, found or used few of the domains which can include IoT blockchain on financial systems, on security, healthcare, and LoRaN networks. So on financial systems, what we have done because finance is a domain which requires huge level of security, the numerous IoT frameworks are likely to subject to smaller budget exchange between computerized articles requiring IoT device to be associated in different manners that consist of what we call them M2M economy or the M2M machines. In healthcare systems, because the data of healthcare is very private and personal to everyone, so blockchain would be very beneficial in securing all those networks. This can be done using role-based or remote access authorization, file authentication pattern, or IoT-based healthcare application can be protected or using the lightweight validation that can be proposed in the network. So these are some of the review or the proposed methods what we have done. So first of all is IoT passport. Passport, everyone know, is a digital, or is a paper identity of ours, an international identity. So it can help in computer user interface. What is the shortcoming is it is completely dependent on trust and is very susceptible to security threats. So in future scope, future work calls for collaborative IoT. A blockchain based proxy re-encryption scheme. It provides scalability and security to the automated payment. In the shortcoming, the number of mine transaction depend on various factors, including gas price and limit. Future implementation can include implementation on different blockchain platforms like Hyperledger. And over the blockchain framework firmware update framework. It provides secure verification to the firmware. In shortcomings, the firmware mechanisms are too lengthy to operate. Decision framework to support blockchain framework for IoT and edge computing. So the benefit it shows the systematic identification of blockchain characteristics suitable for IoT platforms, and in shortcomings, this framework still did not provide any specifics or the requirements. In future scope, this decision framework can be improved into a recommender tool.
Instead of, sorry for the interruption, focus on your main topics. That would be helpful, like, because we have less time.
Yes.
That would be helpful
Yeah,
instead of reading the whole presentation.
Yeah, because this is a review paper, so I would be directly coming to the proposed architecture, which we have given in this. So in our proposed architecture, there are basically three layers in IoT ecosystem, which includes physical layer, a connectivity or a network layer, and the application layer. These are the standard layers in any IoT ecosystem. So in our proposed architecture, we have included a blockchain service layer where all the blockchain network will be lying, which will be between the network and the application layer. So application layer would be the layer where all our administrators sits and the end user can access these applications and these devices. So this IoT layer will directly connect to the network layer where our IP or non-IP networks will decide, and all the sensors and data collection module will be there. So in conclusion, in this paper, we have addressed security issues for IoT ecosystem using blockchain technology. We have done a study on domains like finance, healthcare, network, and several smart devices. All these domains have their specific security requirements and challenges. So blockchain-based IoT arrangements are appropriate for streamlining business forms, improving customer experience, and achieving significant cost efficiencies. This paper also discusses the probable model which can be used by these domains to address security issues using blockchain technology. So benefits which gives us confidence of using this technology is in our future deployments. So these are the references we have used. Thank you. So
Thank you for the presentation. Any questions, ma'am? Hello.
Anshul, nice presentation.
yes,
But
ma'am, thank you.
in this is your review paper, right?
Yes, yes.
So what is your proposed system? Are you compared the same proposed system anywhere already implemented?
Yes, ma'am. See, the architecture I have
Three-layer
discussed.
system you want to do, right?
Yes, yes.
So
See
the
this.
same. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. You were saying something.
Oh no, continue.
Okay, so this three-layer system we have already published journal paper on this three-layer architecture. So now what we have done, we have modified our own three-layer architecture system and included a fourth layer based on blockchain.
Okay. So what type of security you are added here? The
Uh,
features of, okay, blockchain has itself secure, right? But
yes, yes.
instead of that, okay, what type of security you are maintained in your proposed system?
Okay, so ma'am, what we are doing, we have an IoT ecosystem. So what is happening is, because these IoT devices are so vulnerable to all the security threats now available, which are available. So each layer, like perception layer, network layer, and application layer, have their own security challenges. So what we are doing, just to reduce the cost of the security on each of these layers, so we have decided to introduce a dedicated blockchain layer, which, because blockchain in itself is very secure, and the IoT devices which are available in market are vendor neutral, and most of them do not have any security inbuilt. So we will be combining them with a blockchain layer which will handle all the security on these devices.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you,
Very
ma'am.
much.
Okay, our next presentation is by Manish Kumar R. Solanki. I've unmuted you.
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes. His paper is on Solid, a web system to restore the control of users' personal data.
Yes,
Please
ma'am.
begin. Yeah, please
So
begin.
let me share my screen. Is it visible, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you.
Continue, please.
Yes, ma'am. So, good evening to one and all. I am Manish Kumar Solanki. I'm going to present my paper on Solid, a web-based system to restore the control of users' personal data. So these are my outlines, and I will go with my topics one by one. The first one is exploitation of the present web. So we know that e-commerce business transactions are storing consumers' personal data as well. And due to that reason, consumers have lost the control of their own data. And the world has witnessed so many data breaching incidents with the giants like eBay, LinkedIn, Yahoo, Google, and some other IT companies. So the questions have been raised on the reputation of their brand name, loss of money, legal ramifications, and security of intellectual property. And due to that reason, openness of the web has been compromised at great extent. And for that, the founder of the inventor, the person who coined the www, got devastated, and he announced something in one of the web summit at Lisbon, Portugal, on November 5, 2018, that we should now sign a contract for the web that would be based on the present web, but it should provide security to the users, especially for their own data. And as a part of that, he, along with his partner, John Bruce, established a company named Interrupt to make realize its concept called solid. So what is solid? That we'll see now. Fine. So this is the URL of a solid, social link data. And these are the two partners who established the company. And this is, if we go to the URL, it will look like this. Now we'll see one by one the solid components. So how it differs from the traditional, or how it would be differed from the traditional web. So solid is providing you the pods that stands for personal online data stores. So they are working with centralized system, and users can store their personal data. It can be calendar events or photos or comments, anything they want to store. And yes, they would have fine-grained access to the portions of their data. So as per the rights which are given by the users, the companies can access the data of user. And it would look like this. That is, user is having control of his own data with, and different apps are trying to access the data, or they can get the data as per the rights given to the apps. But these apps would be solid apps. This would not be the normal apps. They would be solid enabled apps. And presently, the solid is providing two kinds of application development, that is AngularJS and React.js. So yes, now how a user can get his pod. So user can acquire his pod using the pod providers, and he has to contact the pod provider. Presently, these are the two providers, definitely. We say as cloud storage, Solid community itself, and Interrupt. And they have informed us that where the data of user is getting stored. So here it is shown that Interrupt data is stored at Amazon, and Solid is storing the data with Tencent Cloud, and the location also of these pod providers or the user pods. And one more thing that is useful for everyone, and user would be going with that, that is called self-hosted. It means that I can store my data or pod on my machine itself, and then the app can access from my machine. So that is nothing but the secured version, we can say. But present, as the system is in development phase, this third option, that is self-hosted, has not been enabled due to some technical expertise is required. This is all about pod, and the another component is web ID. So instead of user ID or username, the user will get the web ID. That would be the unique identifier for every user. And once you have to get the web ID from the provider, and that's it, you don't have to log in on with your different usernames. I will see that in the different apps. So this is the format. You can go to the interrupt.net if you want. It is also one of the web ID provider. You have to register, and then we will get our web ID. It will look like this. So our web ID would look like this. My user name is, web ID is mrsolanki1903.interrupt.net. Now, how the question can arise in our mind, how it would be differentiated than the traditional apps. So if we see in the commercial arena, how the apps are collecting our data, they are providing data as well as service. So they're competing for the data, for harvesting the data. Apart from that, in the Solid scenario, they would be providing only service, and data would be stored at the pod providers, that is at a different location, but it would not, the control would not be with the company. And this pod will give you unlimited storage and high speed transfer, and it would be secured backups. Fine, so this I am presenting in this presentation that how I created my web ID and pod store, and how I am accessing the data to the apps. And basically it is a demo app which I had tested on my machine. So this is, yes, I have created my web ID on Interrupt. yes, whenever any app tries to run or tries to access, it will ask you the permissions. And these are the permissions you can set. After these permissions, yes, for example, now I'm showing you, this was the, in the previous scenario, you were looking at that how the app is trying to access your data and permissions given by you. This is my profile. We can say this is my pod, and I have stored this information. And I have, yes, it was run on the local system because it is in the system itself in the trial stage presently. So 127.0.0.1 and 4.2.0.0, it is Node AngularJS app is running. And I have presently given the control of read, write, append, everything in short. And if you look at the role of my data, it is employee. Fine. So I have given control of modification to the app. Now, what app can do? So, for example, it is going to change the role from.
Sorry for the interruption. You just have 1 minute left.
Yes, ma'am. I have only 1 minute. Yes.
Yeah. Please.
Yes, then now the user will. Yes, the app can change now it from employee to lecturer. Now I am revoking the control, that permissions, and it is read only. Now in that case, from lecturer to senior lecturer, it tried to access and try to modify it from lecturer to senior lecturer. It is not allowing. So let me conclude now that definitely we all are experiencing that user control is lost from the WWW, and it is against the standards of Sir Tim Berners-Lee or the purpose of World Wide Web. And to restore it back, Sir has started this system, and definitely we are living in the surrounding of so many giants who are making their livings with harnessing the data or selling out the data. How it is progressing, that the time will tell us. But definitely this I had tested in April, and after April, in this 2-3 months, there is some considerable development in this project, and it is providing now that Node AngularJS and React.js both. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manish. It was a good presentation. Any questions?
Manish, nice presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
But you are added few features in this. But any limitations you are finding till in your system?
Limitation, which point of view, ma'am? Data storage or which kind of limitation?
Data storage.
Okay, no, ma'am. There is no such limitation as far as data storage is concerned, because it is decentralized system. And I would like to tell you one more thing. As far as security is concerned, they are working with Safe Network, SAFE capital. And this company is providing solutions, especially for solid and such kind of applications. It works in the security domain. So they are incorporating these changes in their applications. Presently, these are on the trial basis on their URLs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have our next participant, that is Nancy Sukhadia. I have unmuted you. Are you able to hear me? Nancy?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
You can begin with the presentation.
Okay. Hello.
Yes.
Can I start?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
please start.
Okay.
Yes, it's audible and visible as well. You can begin.
Good evening, all of you. So today I present one of the review paper, and the paper name is Detection of Spastic Cerebral Palsy in Infants Using Different Techniques. So in which I covered the what is spastic cerebral palsy, for which survey I take, and after that how the pediatrician measure the spastic cerebral palsy, and after that I discuss all the techniques which I survey, and after that I conclude some decisions. So here, first of all, what is cerebral palsy? It is the combination of cerebral plus palsy. So cerebral means it refers to the affected area in the brain, and the palsy refers to the brain injuries. So some physical disability faces from the infant. So in cerebral palsy there are some major symptoms which faces by the infants, like poor coordination, stiff muscles, weak muscles, tremors. After that the other symptoms are here, like behavioral problem, then visual or hearing problems. So we must focus on this disease so infant live normally. So here are the some types of cerebral palsy. So here 4 types of cerebral palsy. If I say the ratio of 100%, so in which the 70% of the infant faces the spastic cerebral palsy. So spastic cerebral palsy, in which the paralysis, muscle weakness, muscle stiffness, leg tightness are the some symptoms of spastic CP. So here are other types in which the hypotonic CP is disabled, is disabled if we take care of our infant. So here I show that the spastic cerebral palsy look like that: dyskinetic, then ataxic, then hypotonic. So here some other parameters are useful for detection of CP. So here the main 2 parameters are straight length and cadence. So what is straight length? It is the step length between the left step length, like shown in figure 5, and the cadence is the rhythm between the 2 foot steps, like left to right leg. After that, so some question generated, like what is straight length and cadence. So here I show that. So we can show that the normal healthy infant how easily playing in the garden, and the CP infant faces problem even flat surface. They could not easily walk. So here the spastic cerebral palsy infants. So I review 11 paper, and here I present 9 paper. In all these paper, some researchers take the machine learning model in which they are used machine learning. They are used straight length, cadence, leg length, and age. And the some other researcher use the some sensors like IMU sensor, the known as the inertial measurement unit, and some other pediatrician measure the angle using the goniometer or manually, which I show you here. In the 19th century, the measure the angle using goniometer, which is shown in figure 5, and like manually they just move infant leg hand for prediction of CP. So after that I describe you the how the angle measure using pediatrician. This angle is main important part of the CP. So if the angle is more than the 100 degree, then the CP infant we predict. So here the some angle like popliteal angles, curve sine, then return to flexion of forearm or foot dorsiflexion angle. Here some pediatrician also predict the CP of their knowledge, like the pediatrician stand the infant like this is called the writing reaction. If the infant not stand like this, then they uh, predict that the infant faces CP.
Hello, Nancy.
Huh, ma'am?
You
Yes,
have
ma'am.
last 2 minutes, please.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So here this is the passive tone in infants, and after that this is the active tone in infants. And so now we discuss about the which techniques I review. So I already told that the pediatrician measure the angle using goniometer or manually. After that, some pediatrician observe the video of the infants. After that, the accelerometer, then surface electromyography, pressure matrices, then IMU sensor. In IMU sensor, some IMU sensor have the accelerometer plus gyroscope like two combination, and some other has three combination. After that, machine learning techniques. So we conclude that till now the no one research about the combination of both the limbs to predict the CP in infants at early stages. So we research about that, and we collect data by our own to predict the CP at early stages, so infant cannot faces CP in their life. So we currently research about that in infants. Here I show one video. Here one velcro show that in this velcro I put the IMU sensor to predict the CP in infants. So thank you, and this is my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, for the presentation. Any questions, ma'am? Okay, so we'll move on with the next presentation.
Next, we have Jeenam Mehta. Jeenam Mehta.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, audible.
Okay, let me share my screen.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, go ahead. Show your screen.
Okay. So myself, Jeenam Mehta, the topic of presentation is Medicare with machine learning and deep learning. So let me head over to the introduction. So we know that India is the second most populous country, but we don't know that number of doctors available per 1,000 people is less than one. That is even lesser than the WHO standard. Apart from that, medical checkup is very time-consuming process and expensive as well. We have to first make appointment, then consult doctor, and then pay fees, even though there is no serious health issues. And human doctor cannot recall all the information necessary to diagnose the disease. And sometimes wrong opinions of doctors may lead to the misdiagnosis. At the same time, medical expertise is not available in rural India, leads to unequal access to public health. Now, deadly diseases like pneumonia and malaria causes thousands of deaths every year in South Asia, especially in India. As per guideline of WHO, to detect malaria, we have to manually count number of cells in a blood sample that contains parasite. That is very lengthy and costly process. And in case of pneumonia also, we require radiologists to carefully examine the X-ray images. So what is Medicare that we are proposing? Medicare is an AI-based system that basically operates in two parts. First module allows us to predict the disease based on the symptoms user has provided, and the module works on the concept of machine learning. we will provide the data set that comprises disease and the collection of a symptoms pair. Both doctors and normal people can make use of this disease predictor. And the second mode is allow us to test whether medical image. In case of malaria, it is a blood sample image, and in case of pneumonia, it is an X-ray image. It is whether positive or negative that we can find using deep learning. So this is the flow of work that we have used to build our machine learning and deep learning model. First, we have collected various raw data from online repository data sources. Then we have pre-processed them using various Python libraries so that they are available in a format we can directly apply our machine learning and deep learning algorithm. Then we have performed training. Here we have specified number of epochs so that we get our desired accuracy. And then finally, we have performed testing to check whether our model that we have built works as expected on unseen data or not. So now let's talk about our first module, that is disease prediction using machine learning. Now, disease predictor can make use of various machine learning algorithms that basically influence probability and statistics. But we have choose neo-Bayes because it considers every feature as an independent, and to find out the probability that given feature vector X belongs to class C, here is the formula. It states that to find out the probability, you first have to find out individual probability of each symptoms that is belonging to disease, and then we have to perform product of them. So it will give us the probability. Now, to improve the prediction accuracy, we have used technique named association rule mining that basically uses a priori algorithm. You may have seen this technique when you have visited e-commerce website. When you are purchasing something, they will recommend other items based on the purchased item history. It is generally try to find which items occurs frequently together. So we can employ this same technique in our case as well. We can find out which symptoms commonly occur for particular disease, and then we can generate rules that will suggest the user that they may have missed some symptoms, and after that it will eventually our result make our result more accurate. So now let's talk about some our second module, that is malaria and pneumonia identification using CNN. Now, convolution neural network is a deep learning algorithm used for classification of images. It basically assigns weights and biases to network during the training of model. Now, each input image during training process passes through series of convolution layer, filters, polling layers, fully connected layers, and in an output layer, it either uses softmax and or either uses sigmoid. Sigmoid we have used because our output was binary. So the model that we have built for identification of pneumonia and malaria comprises of 11 layers, and out of them 5 layers are fully connected layers and rest are convolutional layers. All layers uses ReLU activation function except the output layer. Output layer, as I have discussed earlier, uses sigmoid function to generally classify the input either in a positive category or negative category. The model that we have used is trained using Adam optimizer with loss function binary cross entropy, and we have fetched images from dataset in a batch size of 32, and we have specified 5 epochs. Generally, it was giving us good result. So we have also performed image augmentation to have more images by just scaling up, scaling down, rotating them, so that we have wider range of use cases. So now this is analysis and result that we have got from our model. As I have stated earlier, association rule mining, and we have used a priori algorithm. Basically, one of the important terms here we must have to specify is minimum support. It generally states number of times this frequent item set should appear in data set. Now, as you can see from graph, that as our minimum support increases, number of rules that we have generated decreases drastically. At 0.03, number of rules generated is more than 800, and at 0.06, number of rules generated is lesser than 100. So that is the impact of minimum support on number of rules generated. So this is the confusion matrix of malaria. Okay.
You have last 2 minutes to conclude.
Okay. So here confusion matrix of malaria identification using CNN. We have total basically there are 2 levels, infected and uninfected. We have 173 samples of infected. Out of them, 169 identify correctly, while 4 identify four samples wrongly classified. So we can say we got 96 to 97% of accuracy. So to compare our model with some model that is available in general domain, we choose MobileNet to compare our performance of our model with a MobileNet model. As you can see that after every epoch, our loss decreases and accuracy increases. And at fifth epoch, our accuracy is 0.963, while MobileNet provides us 0.9562. So you can say that our model is giving a slightly better result because we have trained our model on our data set, while MobileNet was not trained on our data set. So that is the basic difference. Now these are the tools and technologies that we have used: Python for backend language, and these are the libraries: Scikit, Pandas, NumPy, Keras, and Flask for creating web app. So to conclude that, I can say that we have created disease predictor for disease prediction using symptoms and CNN model for pneumonia and malaria identification. We hope that the web app that we have developed will drastically reduce the medical expertise requirement, cost, and time requirement, and will be very useful in remote areas. But there are some limitations of our system as well. First is that the user may not understand some medical terms provided by symptoms, and another is that CNN model will classify only one image at a time. So this is the future scope. We can have a more wider disease prediction by training our model on huge data set that contains several features. And apart from that, we can directly measure body temperature and blood pressure from medical device and can input them to our model that will make our process automated. So these are the references. Okay, that's it. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Any questions, ma'am?
Jinam, nice presentation in time. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jinam.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, our next presenter is Tejaswini Apte. Yes, Tejaswini.
Yeah, I can hear you. Good evening.
Good evening.
I hope I'm audible to all of you.
Yes, audible. Now please share your screen.
Sure. Is it visible to all of you?
Yes, visible. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, good evening to all the attendees as well as the conference organizer. I'm Tejaswini Apte from Symbiosis Institute of Computer Studies and Research, Pune. And I would like to present some of the ideas or some of the literature where exactly we are moving with respect to the identity management deployment when you are going to take care about the cross-domain application deployment. So for moving ahead, so I am the, I'm the OpenStack instructor. I'm working with the OpenStack technology. And while working with the OpenStack technology, which is nothing but the Ask Cloud platform, I have seen some different kind of, the ways by which the identity and the access management is being developed. And that's how we are moving ahead with respect to the research on that particular technology. So this is the objective. So let me put my slideshow right now. Yeah. So this is my objective, that addressing the privacy preservation in the cross-domain application deployment. Majorly, when you say the cross-domain application deployment, so suppose if you are working with the different kind of cloud environment in the industry production, so in that particular sense, when one particular user request is going to leave one domain of the cloud, and when we are going to move towards the other domain of the cloud, how really the identity preservation mechanism is being carried out. So this is a review paper which is going to move into the detail of the privacy preserving mechanism which are available and where we are trying to move on. So currently, initially when we have started with the identity and the access management, so there are the different kind of tokens which are really going to be generated when the user is going to share the credentials with the cloud environment. And those many of the tokens are going to contain the information about the users, the information about the permissions, the different kind of roles, the different kind of services what the users are allowed to access. So basically the user is going to have the authentication as well as the authorization information, and which is embedded into the token. So initially there were the tokens about, with respect to the way we are going to move on with the applications. The tokens are going to be, the permissions are going to be added or removed from that particular, those many of roles. So that's what the Zen server is trying to provide you. Now, as soon as we move ahead with the different kind of cloud environment, so there are the different kind of tokens what the existing literature is trying to provide you, which are really based on how really the token is, how really the user request is going to be identified by one cloud provider. And when the request is going to move to the other data center or the cloud provider, how that particular request or the user credentials are going to be, handled. So with respect to that, so there were initially the role-based access control, which is going to take care about the subject, the privileges, and the object. So that means it is going to have the, the users, along with that the authorization information, along with that the service information or the object information, what user would like to access. Fine. So this was happening. And now the literature also have suggested this particular thing, that if you can have the cloud, which is nothing but the distributed infrastructure itself, so into that particular distributed infrastructure, how this secure transferring of the attributes are going to be taken care by. So for that particular thing, so there were the, attribute-based identification mechanism as well. So attribute-based identification mechanism is going to say that, okay, you share only those many of the attributes which are required to be shared for that particular application. Do not share all the attributes. But the problem is, if the identity provider is, is going to revoke all the roles from that particular user, is that particular user is going to be identified by the different cloud provider or not? So there were the different kind of challenges. So to, to come with those challenges, there are the, the federated identity management, which really exists into the literature, and many of the cloud services are right now using it. So our research starts from this particular portion of the federated identity management, which is kind of, which is going to, architected by two different entities, you can say, which is nothing but the service provider and the identity provider. Now consider a scenario when two different kind of cloud providers are going to interact with each other. So in that particular sense, how really the user is going to identify by one particular cloud provider, and how that identity information is going to pass to the other cloud provider. So your federated identity management gives you the glimpse of, okay, you do have the service provider and the identity provider. Identity provider is responsible to take care about the authentication of that particular user, and service provider is responsible to transmit that particular authentication with respect to the different kind of cloud provider over the network. So to support this particular idea of the federated identity management, there were the three different protocols which exist, which are named as the security assertion markup language, which are nothing but the SML or the SAML, you can say. The other is, sorry about it. The other is the open authentication, which is nothing, the OAuth. And the third one is the OpenID Connect or OIDC. Now, with respect to the security assertion markup language, it again go with the service.
Hello, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Yes, but you have a last 2 minutes left for your presentation.
Sure, sure. Thanks a lot. So you are going to have the, when you are going to take care about the SAML, so it is not at all optimized for the large data transactions while, while integrating the different kind of clouds. Open authentication is trying to provide you. So open authentication works with the relying party as well as the identity provider. But there is a chances of the leaks that your identities are going to be leaked from the relying party. So on top of the open authentication or OAuth, the OpenID Connect is being built up. So which actually creates the interface to take care about how exactly the identity information is going to be carried out. So this is a table which is really focusing on how really the SAML, OAuth and OpenID Connect is going to be taken care by with respect to the privacy, with respect to the federated identity support, and with respect to the OpenStack application deployment. So we are majorly focused on to to integrate the SAML, to integrate the OpenID Connect, to integrate the OAuth, so that the privacy preservation can be accomplished with the maximum compatibility, because it is said so that if you are targeting the maximum compatibility, you need to compromise with respect to the security. So we are trying to minimize this particular aspect of three of them of all three protocols. So these are the references what I have used. So this is the conclusion what we're going to have to carry the compatibility while preserving the identity transmission during the cross deployment application, or you can say the cloud. Okay, so thanks for giving me the chance to sharing my thoughts.
Thank you, Tejaswini. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have any questions?
Tejaswini, practically you are implemented this?
Practically, because I'm working with the OpenStack environment for so long now, because I have tested lots of things with the OpenStack. So I'm practically trying to implement the SAML because I am the OpenStack cloud administrator.
Okay.
Okay, so practically I'm trying to implement this particular thing, that how really the privacy preservation can be done, as well as I'm a part of the, the developers community for the OpenStack. I'm following the, the OpenStack development group as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you, Tejaswini.
Thanks a lot. And stay healthy and stay safe, all of you.
Same to you. Yes, our next presenter, Afshana Nasir. Hello.
Hello, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. So may I start?
Yeah, you can start.
Thank you so much.
Please share your screen, Afshana. Yes.
Yep. It's visualizing?
Yes, it's visible. Go ahead.
Sorry for something interrupting. Okay. So here we go. Good evening, everyone. It was a great honor to become a part of ICT. So I am, on behalf of University of Liberal Arts, would like to representing our research topic. So our research topic mainly focus on implementation of OSPF3 in IP version 4 and 6 for establish a wide area network. Usually for focusing in a wide area network, we can reconnecting with several of sub areas, contracting with at a time, and to continue the full control over the area, we must need to establish a big network. So how would the scenario will representing in our project? So where it goes? That's our honorable author details, and it's just a simple agenda of our briefing step, that how we're working on and how the steps will be. So before that, we are applying. Sorry, I'm interrupting. So before that, there are several of paper are working, and the several of project are still investing in OSPF v3 and IP version 4 and IP version 6. But none of them are able to catch our gap, our kind of project. So if we are comparing our paperwork with those, then we'll find that there are lots of efficiency that they are highlighting, and we are only focusing on the majority of OSPF v3 in real world. So why we are and why we will be our working will be. So So as we already said that our agenda is implementation of OSV3 in IP version 4 and 6 for establish a wide area network. We are not only focusing the implementations, we are focusing here the protocol working efficiency and the maintaining of catch efficient result of the wide area and the implementation in real world. So in briefing discussion, why OSPF-V3? We all know that OSPF-V3 is totally designed for IP version 6 compatibility, and IP version 4 and 6 will spontaneously working with OSPF-V3. For this reason, we are choosing this OSPF-V3 protocol. Otherwise, there were lots of routing protocol in our environment, but OSPF-V3 give us a powerful, efficient effort. That's why we like to choosing this. So as we told that we are working with a big area, so how will be our area? In IP version 4, we establish a demo prototype area kind of this, and for IP version 6, we are like to represent a demo like this. So now, what will be the scenario? Like when we are trying to apply in the IP version 4 in a big area, and how the area will be coverage us and give us the valuable feedback. For this reason, we need to go ahead. In situation of IP version 4, we all see that we are making a big zone area like by establishing router and switch to defining that those area is different from each other. So in this case, we are able to grab that the whole area, like in this here, router 2, router 4, and router 6 and router 8 will be the area border router. Area border router where we can set up the router ID for everyone, and in case of they all are able to connecting with at the time each another. In case of efficiency, we can get the full information and full efficiency, everything. And in establish a big area, area 1, area 0, area 2, they are totally compatible, not like each another. So area 1 is, as we can see, area 1 is directly connected with area 0, but area 2 is not compatible with this. For this reason, we need to establish virtual link. Virtual link or virtual logical setup, we can able to get those information from one area border to another area border and get reconnect or read the full summarization, or we can see the full visualization from one area to another area. So as we tell that we have router 1 to router 9 to detect a wide area network. So it will be very common scenario that one area can establish with various types of network is a common thing that my one sub area can be established with another protocol, and the other hand will be established with so many. So in case of indifferencing, we establish EIGRP1 for visualizing and for comparing that how the compatibility with work with other area, and the rest of the area we are using for OSPF-V3. So as we already told that we are establishing here the virtual linking for logical setup and to get the full competitive result. So EIGRP router is totally designed with.
Yes, Afsana.
Yes, ma'am.
Please.
Yeah. EIGRP route protocol is totally established in area 0 border router of which is border router of area R2 router, and in R2 router So in this case, it is a vice versa of the combination of ESPF-V3 and EIGRP. So how it will be occurs and how we can get it. So in this case, EIGRP, we all know that EIGRP protocol as the redistribution process. By the redistribution, we can get the total link up in a different type of protocol in one situation. So in IP version 4, we set up that EIGRP. And if we go in a router history of for router 2, this is applying the redistribution method and showing two different protocols at a time. And in case when we are trying to get the full review from the 1 to router 9, and in case of full area, then it's hold the full summarization via virtual link. This can be only happen because of virtual link. And the area border router are directly connected with the virtual link, and the virtual link are directly give us the information as a vice versa process. And in this case, the successful ping rate is every time is high. And yeah, in case of, we all know that in case of packet trace, we must have to face the problem of packet loss scenario. So it's very rare in IP version 4. So that's the outlook of our router 2, EIGRP1 and OSPF1. So we can see that the two networks are interconnecting each another, and there will be no error occurs. And in even though when we ping from the router 2 to router 9, we can see the all network will be in there. But in case of IP version 6, we also applied the same processes for our to go ahead. But we can see that there are several of efficiency also we can pop up. Like in case of router. In case of router efficiency, they work well too well. But in case of packet loss, they are too much. Because in our days, all of the devices are compatible with IP version 4, but they are not compatible with IP version 6. That's the big lackings of our modern area. In our modern side, we cannot cope up this, because if we are compatible with IP version 6, then it will not be compatible with IP version 4. And one of the reasons is that we can easily applicable for security in IP version 6 zone, but we cannot acceptance the security in IP version 4. That is our another lacking, which we can think. So in this router, we also same that in IP version 6 also EIGRP 1 and OSPF1 are working with together, and have all network summary. Also router 1 from one to another is also get the full network summary. So in case of packet loss, what we were telling that our device capacity cannot cope up our demand. So in case of ping rate or sending messages from one area to another, IP version 4 give us the full capacity and efficiency of the technology. And IP version 6, every time it's ping rate from a difference, and it can delay or it can be late. We also get the result analysis by that IP version 4 give us the full scenario, and IP version 6 get us the could not cope up with us demand. And in case of security, why we need security? Because as we already know that our area is a big area, so it can be happen for me that we can control the area from 1 to area 0 or area 0 to area 1. In this case, if there is no security purposes, then our data will be get lost, and we can be delayed, and we cannot cope up with our security system. So as the IP version 6 gives us the facility of facility of input security. So for this reason, IP version 6 will be the best for future generations. And for this, there are lots of simulation tools for testing up the packet loss and packet gain, or testing up the network scenario. There are NS2, LS3, Packet Tracer, one of the famous NetSim, GNS3. So we choose GNS3 because in case of GNS3, it's very compatibly, we can work with simultaneously, and we can work with a real router environment, and the data cannot be lost.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the presentation. We are hurrying up.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Apsara, you are saying your system is efficient, right?
Sorry, ma'am, I can't hear.
Apsara, you are saying your system is efficient. That is in terms of packet loss and the security, or any other terms is there? Packet rate?
Ma'am, packet rate is occurs because our device cannot propagate with IP version 6. And security system, when our devices will be competitive with IP version 6 and IP version 6 will be available, then we can ensure the security system. In IP version 4, it will not compatible.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Latika Desai. Anyone has any question for her? Hello. Any session chair have any questions? Okay, no, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Latika Desai.
Thank you.
Yes. Now I like to thank our session chair, Dr. Latika Desai and Deepsika Bhatia. Thank you for being with us for this session. Yes, madam.
Thank you from my side.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And also I like to share with all the presenters that we already have submitted your paper for the publication. So now it will take around 4 to 5 months to come online on the Springer website. And due to pandemic, this time we are taking this online, but hope to see you all again in the physical mode next year, again in the Goa in ICT4SD 2021. And thank you all for being with us in this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So if anyone has any question, I am keeping this forum open for just 5 more minutes. So you can type your questions in the chat box if you want some email ID of someone, if they are related to your work. So I'm keeping this open for just 5 more minutes. Thank you.